Why is David wrong? I guess we'll start there.
Well, I think it's the prescription that's wrong. There's a lot in the analysis that I think is good. A lot of the diagnosis is good. A lot of his complaints make sense. But the prescription is completely otherworldly. He wants to go back on the gold standard. He wants to dismantle the federal government. It's like a fully comprehensive reinvention of the American system of government. And I think, he knows that that is impossible. He knows it isn't going to happen. And so he sort of deliberately put himself out of the debate about what we should actually be doing.
David, we got to give you a shot to respond to that.
Okay, well, I spent a lot of time, 700 pages, going through 80 years of history to show where we've made mistakes over time and where we did good. By the way, the 1950s and 60s I thought were a golden era of fiscal rectitude and sound money under Eisenhower and William McChesney Martin. I thought that Carter Glass, who was the father of the Fed, designed it, had the right idea in mind, a banker's bank that did nothing except supply liquidity at the Badgett kind of rules. But since the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, including the great deficits of the Reagan era, we've gotten off track, and then we got Greenspan and Bernanke, and they've turned the Fed into a bubble machine. And now we've had serial bubbles, and we're stuck in this monstrous system that begets, it's like the Old Testament, one bad thing begets another. So I laid out a few prescriptions at the end that were designed to be deliberately provocative and radical as a kind of standard of measure of what might work in some ideal world and how far away we are today, and why I wrote the thing for the Times, Sunday Times last week, called Sundown America, because I don't think this doomsday machine called the budget or this bubble machine called the Fed can be stopped, and it's going to hit a wall and lead to some very bad things.
But in your Times piece, you also have timing in there with how you think it's going to play out in the market and when. And what stood out to me was when we've spoken to market leaders like a Stan Druckenmiller, who talks about generational theft, who thinks we're in for a very rough road ahead, he's very careful and deliberate, as other market insiders have been, not to give any timing. And you're saying in the next couple of years, things are going down. Why do you believe that?
Well, because I think now this bubble has become so preposterous. The banks of the world, all the central banks are part of a convoy of bubble machines. Look at the Bank of Japan over the weekend announcing $75 billion of purchases a month, not just government bonds. They're going to buy ETFs, stock. They're going to buy anything they get their hands on. But remember, Japan is 1/3 our size. So if you put it in our scale, over 2 years doing that month after month is the equivalent of Bernanke saying, I'm going to buy $5 trillion. I'm going to expand my balance sheet by $5 trillion. This is bonkers. This is John Law South Sea bubble stuff from the 18th century. That's where the Bank of Japan is, and it's bringing everybody else into a great currency war. And the reason I think we're nearing the end of this is the head of the IMF, which is supposed to be, the voice of discipline and rectitude, said, hey, that's great. Run your printing press in Japan so fast, that's what she said, that the thing will probably melt down before the 2 years are over. A currency war is coming. A race to the bottom is coming. Insanity has infected all the central banks of the world. And if you think, don't worry about my prescriptions, worry about what's happening right now in all of these different venues.
But David, if I can just jump in here, how can you say that? Don't worry about my prescriptions. I mean, that's the problem, right? What do we do about this? No one denies that, the economy is struggling. Nobody denies that mistakes were made when we got into this situation. But how can you sit there and say, don't worry about my prescriptions? Why should we be even interested in what you have to say if you don't have serious prescriptions?
Because Einstein said the measure of insanity is if you keep doing the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. The Fed, you can't even talk to them. 0 interest rates for 6 years, that's what they're proposing. At least stop that. If you don't want to go all the way to my banker's bank and shut down the open market committee, which you should, and get out of the government bond market and just provide liquidity on a standby basis, at least allow interest rates to work. How can you have capitalism if there's no price of money, if there's no price of debt?
Do you think Ben Bernanke is taking an unjustified victory lap, patting himself on the back when you look at the S&P and the Dow? Because for investors, they're having a beautiful run here, but if you actually look at how Americans are being affected, they're in a terrible state.
We were at this same point exactly 4,750 days ago. March 2000, the S&P was within a hair, the 500, of where it is today. And if someone is taking a victory lap for creating the same bubble the third time in a row with the same kind of crazy speculation bubbling up already, then they have no clue what they're doing. Bernanke is a very dangerous man.
Clive.
Look, this is ridiculous, but Bernanke, I mean, the idea that Bernanke is taking a victory lap is nonsense. I mean, Bernanke, like other central bankers, they're worried. Of course they're worried about the situation. They're trying to do their best under difficult circumstances. And it's
sir,
just
you're
not
the
good
voice
enough,
of the status quo, and I ask, how well is that working out when if you measured the unemployment rate honestly, it's 13% if we had the same participation rate we had in 2000. So
But
three
David,
bubbles.
it's a striking feature of your book is that we don't need to worry about unemployment. You see unemployment as one of the remedies for the situation. You say in your book, if unemployment rises, that will drive wages down and price people back into work. When did that last happen?
That's what I'm saying, but I'm saying also to you that all of this massive balance sheet expansion, money creating, which does nothing but stay in Wall Street and reward speculators, is doing nothing for the real economy. Nothing for the real economy. So why do we keep doing the same thing? That's all I'm saying.
Well, it's better than the alternative, in my view, and frankly, you haven't even offered a plausible alternative.
I've got a very good alternative. I've got a very good alternative. Fire the Open Market Committee, get all these money printers off of there, find a Volcker somewhere who's going to say, look it, we're going to sober up, discipline is coming, we're going to let the market breathe and have some interest rates. If they go up a couple of points, so be it, because you can't have capitalism, you can't have financial markets with all these front runners and speculators making a killing for no good reason except to create another huge risk.